"Daddy, that waitress looks like Mommy," said 5-year-old Emily from the back seat of the car, hugging her teddy bear, Max. Her father, Ethan, a widowed millionaire, glanced in the direction she pointed, half distracted, expecting the usual toddler imagination. But the moment his eyes landed on the woman, something inside him froze. Saturday morning had started so peacefully, a bright sun in the sky, and Ethan, for the first time in months, decided to take Emily out for lunch. It had been ages since it was just the two of them without schedules, meetings, or therapy sessions. Since Claire, his wife, had died, Ethan's life had turned into a whirlwind of responsibilities. Nannies, school routines, endless work. He had almost forgotten how it felt to slow down. He parked outside a small, unassuming restaurant with wooden tables set outside and the smell of home-cooked food wafting into the street. Emily was buzzing with joy, tugging on his hand as they stepped inside. A little bell chimed above the door. The place was cozy, filled with chattering families and the clatter of dishes, and for a moment, Ethan felt something rare, peace. They took a seat by the window. Emily swung her legs under the table, coloring a kid's menu while Ethan glanced around, trying to catch a waiter's attention. That's when everything changed. Emily leaned over and whispered, as if sharing a secret, "Daddy, look, that lady looks like Mommy." Ethan gave a small smile, ready to dismiss it as childlike fantasy. But when he turned to look, the world tilted. It wasn't just resemblance. It was her. Same height, same soft brown hair falling over her shoulders, the same delicate mouth, even the familiar flick of her hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. He blinked repeatedly, thinking his mind was playing tricks, but she didn't vanish. She stood there, pad in hand, smiling politely at another table. It was Claire, or someone who looked exactly like her. His pulse pounded. His hand clutched Emily's without realizing, and she looked up at him, confused. He tried to look away, to steady himself, but his eyes kept drifting back as if pulled by gravity. The waitress moved casually through the room, completely unaware of the storm she had just triggered. Ethan sat frozen, his thoughts spiraling as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The woman wasn't just similar to Claire, she was her, or at least everything in him screamed that she was. The way she smiled, the exact tone of her hair, even her posture. It wasn't like looking at someone who reminded him of his wife. It was like looking at her reflection from another life. But Claire was dead. He had buried her himself. He remembered every painful detail of that day. The closed casket, the tears he shed until there was nothing left inside him, the nights he'd woken up still reaching out for her in bed only to find cold sheets. He had accepted it, or at least forced himself to live with it. So how could this be possible? The waitress moved to another table, laughing softly with an elderly couple. That laugh, it was identical, not just in sound, but in warmth, in depth. Ethan's stomach churned, a sour, bitter taste rising in his throat. He glanced at Emily, who was now folding her napkin like it was a toy, blissfully unaware of the storm erupting inside her father. She had seen it too. Children don't invent these kinds of things. They don't say, "She looks like Mommy," unless there's a reason. Ethan tried to convince himself that maybe he was just overwhelmed. Maybe he was projecting. Maybe it was grief, memory, and coincidence playing a cruel trick. But the longer he sat there watching her, the less convinced he became. He didn't even notice his grip tightening around the edge of the table until Emily tapped his hand gently and asked, "Are you okay, Daddy?" He couldn't answer. He needed air. He needed to leave before he lost his mind. Without a word, Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out some bills, and placed them neatly on the table. He scooped Emily up into his arms, ignoring her soft protest that she hadn't finished her juice. "We'll go for ice cream later," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He moved through the restaurant like it was on fire, his heart slamming against his ribs. The bell above the door jingled again as they stepped back into the sunlight, but the world outside no longer felt bright. It was disorienting, like he had just stepped out of a dream, or deeper into one. He strapped Emily into her car seat, her tiny arms wrapped tightly around Max, her teddy bear, as if she could sense something had shaken her father to the core. Ethan sat in the driver's seat, his hands gripping the steering wheel while his eyes stared blankly through the windshield. He couldn't move, couldn't drive, couldn't think. Who was that woman? How was it possible? Every part of him screamed that he had just seen Claire, but logic tried to argue back. Claire was gone. She'd died. They'd said goodbye. He'd mourned. And yet, there she was, smiling and carrying plates of food like she was just another person, living a normal life. He turned to glance back at the restaurant one last time. Through the window, he could still see her moving between tables, talking with customers, as if she hadn't just cracked open someone's entire reality. His chest tightened, his breath shallow. He knew this wasn't over. There was no way he could just leave it like that. Something inside him, stronger than reason, told him that whatever this was, it was far from finished. He turned the key in the ignition, and the car rumbled to life. Ethan didn't have a destination in mind. He just drove, letting the road unfold while his thoughts tangled like 1,000 wires inside his head. He barely noticed the passing streets, the blinking traffic lights, or the blur of people walking along the sidewalks. His grip on the wheel remained tight, his jaw clenched. In the rearview mirror, he could see Emily staring out the window, still hugging Max, her face calm but distant, as if she too was sensing something heavy had settled between them. It had been so long since Ethan felt this unstable, this uncertain about what was real. He wasn't the type to believe in miracles or ghosts, and yet what he'd just experienced didn't fit into any logical box he knew. How could someone look, act, and sound so much like Claire without being her? It wasn't just appearance. It was something deeper, something that pulled at his chest like a familiar melody playing faintly in the background. Eventually, he found himself parked in front of an old park he and Claire used to visit before Emily was born. It was one of the few places left that held memories untouched by grief. Towering trees shaded the grassy area, and the sound of kids laughing filled the air. For the first time that day, Ethan breathed in deeply, trying to settle his racing thoughts. He got out of the car and gently lifted Emily from the back seat. She didn't say anything, just rested her head on his shoulder like she used to when she was a toddler and the world felt too big. They walked quietly to a wooden bench beneath a wide oak tree. Ethan sat down, holding Emily close, feeling the breeze rustle through her hair in a way that reminded him painfully of Claire. Every detail of that day refused to let him go. Emily sat beside him, legs swinging, her little fingers absent-mindedly playing with a leaf she'd picked up. For a few minutes, Ethan just watched her in silence, trying to ground himself in the present. The park was peaceful, parents chatting on benches, dogs chasing balls, the warm scent of grass in the air. But inside, he was unraveling. His mind replayed the waitress's smile, her posture, her voice. He didn't want to scare Emily, but he couldn't pretend everything was normal either. She turned to him suddenly, resting her head gently on his arm. "Daddy, are you sad?" she asked. Her voice was soft, full of that innocent concern only a child can have. Ethan swallowed hard. He wanted to lie, to tell her he was just tired or had a headache. But the truth was sitting too heavily on his chest. "I'm just thinking about some things," he said finally, brushing a hand through her curls. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she whispered, "It was Mommy, wasn't it?" Her words hit him like a slap, but she wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't confused. She had seen what he saw. Ethan stared ahead, his throat tight. "No, sweetheart," he replied, though his voice lacked conviction. It was someone who looked a lot like her. Even as he said it, the words felt hollow. Maybe he was trying to convince himself more than her. Time passed slowly as they sat on that bench. Ethan felt like his brain was stuck in a loop, trying to decode what had just happened at the restaurant. Could he really be sure what he saw? Was it just the lighting, the grief, the longing distorting his reality? Deep down, though, a voice refused to shut up, a quiet, persistent whisper that said, "It wasn't your imagination." As the sun dipped lower behind the trees, casting long golden shadows across the park, Ethan knew he couldn't just ignore what he'd seen. The rational part of his mind tried to tell him it was a coincidence, just a woman who looked like Claire. But something stronger kept rising to the surface, louder with each passing minute. It wasn't a mistake, and he needed answers. They stayed at the park until the sky started turning pink and the evening breeze carried a slight chill. Emily, growing tired, nestled into his side, and Ethan knew it was time to head home. On the drive back, she quickly drifted to sleep in the back seat, her head slumped against Max's soft fur. Ethan kept glancing at her through the mirror. Grateful she was too young to fully understand the storm that had cracked open inside him, but he also knew that somehow this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Emily too. That woman, whoever she was, had shattered the fragile peace Ethan had built over the past 3 years. He tucked Emily into bed as gently as he could when they got home, slipping off her shoes, straightening her blanket, and brushing the hair from her forehead. He stood there for a long moment, watching her sleep, the room dim and still. Then he made a quiet promise to himself. He was going to find out who that woman was, not just because of the resemblance to Claire, but because Emily had seen it too, and children don't lie about that kind of thing. After he left her room, he wandered into the kitchen, opened the fridge, took out a beer, and left it untouched on the counter. His stomach was in knots. There was no way this ended with him doing nothing. He sat at the kitchen table, elbows on the surface, face buried in his hands. The images of the waitress kept flashing through his mind. How she walked, smiled, even how she tucked her hair behind her ear. It wasn't a trick of the mind. It wasn't the lighting or wishful thinking. It was real. Ethan pulled out his phone and stared at it for several seconds before scrolling through his contacts. He paused on one name, Marcus. Marcus wasn't just his personal security consultant. He was someone Ethan trusted with his life. If there was anyone who could quietly find out who this woman was, it was him. With a deep breath, Ethan tapped the call button. It rang twice before Marcus answered. "Hey boss, everything okay?" Ethan hesitated a second, his voice low. "I need your help with something. It's important." Marcus didn't miss a beat. "Name it." Ethan got up from the table and paced slowly across the kitchen. "There's a woman. I saw her today. She looks exactly like Claire." The silence on the other end was long, heavy. Marcus finally asked, "You want me to find out who she is?" "Yeah," quietly. "No contact. I just need to know who she is, where she's from, how long." "She's worked at that restaurant." "Everything," Marcus simply replied. "Consider it done." Ethan ended the call and let the phone drop to the table. The relief was brief. This wasn't going to be easy, and he knew that. But he couldn't rest until he had answers. That woman had stepped out of nowhere and pulled the past back into the present like a tidal wave. Whatever her story was, Ethan was determined to uncover it. He just didn't realize yet how deep the story would go. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, staring at the ceiling as though answers might be written in the shadows. Every time he closed his eyes, the same image returned. The waitress. Her smile, her eyes, her laugh that mirrored Claire's so precisely, it ached. Around 3 a.m., unable to lie still anymore, he got up, padded quietly through the dark hallway, and settled on the living room couch with his phone in hand. He typed the name of the restaurant into a search engine, hoping to find some clue. Olbai, photo, maybe a review that mentioned her. But there was nothing. No photos of staff. No social media pages that showed her face. It was like she didn't exist outside of that building. That made it worse. It made it feel like the universe had dangled something in front of him, something impossible, and then yanked it away. He kept scrolling, digging, refreshing pages that offered nothing but generic information. Eventually, with the house still wrapped in silence and the faint hum of the fridge the only sound, Ethan leaned back into the couch and stared at the ceiling. Marcus had said he'd look into it, but Ethan felt a gnawing urgency. Sitting still felt like surrender. He needed to do something, anything. That's when he made a quiet decision. The next day, he would return to the restaurant. Not to confront her, not yet, but to watch, to observe, to try to understand what this woman meant. Because the more he thought about it, the more it felt like this wasn't just chance. She hadn't just stumbled into his life for no reason. Whether it was fate, a hidden truth, or something he couldn't even name yet. Ethan knew this. He wouldn't be able to rest until he had the whole story. By sunrise, Ethan was already dressed, breakfast made, and Emily's lunch packed in her backpack. He tried to act normal, keeping their morning routine smooth and cheerful. Emily didn't ask any more questions about the woman, but Ethan noticed how she clung to Max more than usual, how her eyes darted up to his face from the back seat during the drive to school. After dropping her off, he drove straight to the restaurant. He parked across the street, staying in his car with the engine off, heart pounding like he was preparing for a stakeout. The morning rush hadn't started yet, but there was movement inside. Delivery drivers came and went. A cook stepped out back for a smoke. Then, there she was, the woman. She came through a side door, her hair tied up messily, an apron wrapped around her waist, carrying 2 heavy boxes in her arms. Ethan sat up straighter. His breath caught in his throat again. It was her, no doubt about it. There was no way someone else could have that same walk, that same exact tilt of the head, that same casual grace that Claire had. He resisted the overwhelming urge to jump out of the car and run to her. He had to stay calm. He needed clarity, not chaos. So instead, he did what he had promised himself he wouldn't do. He pulled out his phone and, trying to be as discreet as possible, snapped a few photos. He needed Marcus to see them, to confirm that this wasn't just grief or imagination. As he lowered the phone, the woman disappeared back into the building. Ethan leaned back against the seat, hands trembling slightly. No matter how much he tried to rationalize, the feeling in his chest only got stronger. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The hours passed slowly. Ethan remained in his car, eyes trained on the restaurant's windows, watching every glimpse of her. The woman, whoever she was, moved with ease between the tables, smiling at customers, laughing occasionally, carrying plates like she had done it for years. But to Ethan, every movement was more than routine. It was a memory in motion. He wasn't just seeing someone who looked like Claire. He was seeing Claire herself in gestures, in mannerisms, in the quiet way she listened to people. It was unnerving. But more than that, it was haunting. Ethan found himself analyzing everything. How she greeted older customers with genuine warmth. How she knelt down to speak with kids at their level. How she never stopped moving but never seemed rushed. She didn't seem like someone playing a role or wearing a mask. She seemed real, happy even. And that complicated everything. Because if she was a stranger who happened to look like Claire, why did she make Ethan feel like he was watching a missing piece of his life? Was it possible Claire had a twin? Or a relative no one ever knew about? His mind cycled through every possibility. A sister, a cousin, a freak genetic coincidence. Nothing made sense. As lunchtime neared, the restaurant filled up and Ethan finally received a message from Marcus. Got some info. Meet me at the corner cafe in 30 minutes. Ethan didn't respond right away. He glanced through the windshield once more and saw her laughing with a group at a corner table. That laugh, it cut right through him. He knew he couldn't just walk away from this, but he also knew he needed answers now. With one last look, he started the car and pulled away, the image of her still burning in his mind like a snapshot he couldn't shake. The cafe where he met Marcus was quiet and mostly empty, just a few people sipping lattes while typing on laptops. Marcus was already there, seated at a table near the back with a small coffee and his phone in hand. He raised a hand casually when he saw Ethan walk in. Ethan didn't waste time. He slid into the seat across from him, heart pounding with anticipation. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice low but firm. Marcus nodded and pulled out a notepad. "Her name is Anna Moore. She lives a few neighborhoods over, in a quiet residential area. Works full-time at the restaurant. Been there for about 3 years. Before that, she bounced around doing odd jobs. Cleaning gigs, small diners, nothing steady." Ethan leaned forward, absorbing every word. "What about her past?" Marcus scratched the back of his neck. "That's where it gets strange. Her records start around age 5. Before that, nothing. No birth certificate, no medical files, no school enrollment. Just a note in the adoption file. Found at local shelter. No known relatives." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "She's an orphan." "Most likely," Marcus said. "Grew up in a state-run home. A woman I spoke to remembered her as quiet, polite. Said she always seemed different, not like the other kids." Ethan's mind was racing. So this woman, Anna, didn't just resemble Claire. She had a mysterious past, no family, no origin before age 5. It was too much of a coincidence. "You think she could have been adopted under a new identity?" Marcus nodded slowly. "It's possible. Someone may have wanted to erase where she came from." Ethan sat back in his chair, stunned. The walls of logic he had tried to build around his emotions were crumbling fast. He looked up at Marcus and said, "I need to know everything." When Ethan left the cafe, the weight of what Marcus had just told him pressed hard on his chest. He climbed into his car and sat there, staring at the dashboard, hands limp on the steering wheel. Anna Moore, a name that meant nothing yesterday, and now felt impossibly tied to everything he once lost. Her history, or lack of one, echoed like an unanswered question in his mind. No birth records, no early childhood documentation, just an orphaned girl appearing out of nowhere at age 5. Ethan had always known that grief could distort memory, that loss could make you see things that weren't there. But this wasn't his imagination. There was something hidden in Anna's past, something buried so deep it had taken 3 decades to rise to the surface. His thoughts kept looping back to one awful possibility. What if she was more than a look-alike? What if she was family? A twin Claire never knew she had. He had never heard of Claire having a sister, much less a twin, but her family had always been guarded. Her parents had passed away, not long after Claire died, and they hadn't exactly been open about their past. Ethan remembered whispered conversations, hints at family estrangement, old photos that were never explained. Could Claire's family have hidden something like this? A child lost or given away or stolen? The idea was terrifying and yet oddly plausible. Back at home, he tried to go through old photo albums, looking for anything that might help. A matching birthmark, a repeated face in the background, a detail he'd once missed. Nothing stood out. Everything now felt like a puzzle missing its key piece. He didn't notice how long he sat there on the couch until he looked up and realized the sun had started to set, and the need to return to the restaurant, to see her again, was stronger than ever. By the time he parked across the street again, the lunch crowd had thinned, and the restaurant had settled into its mid-afternoon lull. Ethan's heart raced as he sat watching the door, half expecting her to walk out, again with another box in her arms. But this time, he couldn't just stay in the car. He needed to see her up close again, to hear her voice directed at him. This wasn't about confronting her, it was about confirming what his soul already suspected. He got out of the car, crossed the street, and pushed open the door. The familiar bell above jingled, the smell of food still warm in the air. Anna was near the back of the dining room, wiping down a table. She looked up as he entered, and when her eyes met his, she smiled politely. No flicker of recognition, no strange pause, just kindness. She walked toward him with a notepad in hand, her apron slightly stained with food. "Good afternoon. Table for one?" she asked, her tone friendly, professional. Ethan stood frozen for a beat before answering. "Yes, please." She gestured to a table near the window, coincidentally the same one where he had sat with Emily just a day earlier. "I'll be right back with the menu," she said as he sat down. When she returned moments later and placed the menu in front of him, Ethan's hand accidentally brushed hers. For a split second, he thought she felt it too. Some jolt of recognition, something unexplained. But she simply smiled and said, "Let me know if you have any questions." And then she walked away. Ethan watched her every step, heart pounding, mind buzzing. The more time passed, the more he became convinced this wasn't a dead end. It was the beginning of something much bigger than he could have imagined. Ethan sat at the table, staring at the menu without actually reading it. The words blurred together, irrelevant. He wasn't there for the food. Every few seconds, his eyes darted back toward Anna as she moved through the dining room, taking orders, delivering drinks, smiling effortlessly. He noticed little things. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way she laughed when an older man at the next table made a joke, even the way she leaned in slightly to listen when someone spoke softly. All of it felt like watching a part of Claire he thought he had lost forever. The resemblance wasn't just skin deep, it was mannerisms, energy, presence. When Anna returned to his table, she had a notepad in one hand and a glass of iced tea in the other. "On the house," she said, placing it down. "It's warm out today." Ethan looked up, forcing a smile. "Thanks. That's very kind of you." She gave a quick nod, then asked, "Do you want a recommendation, or are you in the mood for something specific?" Ethan hesitated, then replied, "Whatever you think is best. I trust your judgment." Her smile widened just a bit. "Stroganoff's the special today. Classic comfort food." "Sounds perfect," he said, handing her the menu without opening it. As she walked back toward the kitchen, Ethan exhaled slowly, his fingers tapping against the table. He needed to say something to her eventually. He needed to find a way in, to start a conversation that might lead to answers. But he couldn't be too direct. He couldn't scare her. She was kind, approachable, but also cautious. She seemed like someone who kept people at arm's length for a reason. And if the story Marcus had uncovered was true, Ethan could understand why. When she returned with the plate a few minutes later, the smell alone reminded him of dinners Claire used to cook when they were first married. Warm, simple, comforting. "Here you go," Anna said, placing the plate in front of him with practiced grace. "Let me know if you need anything else." She started to turn away, but Ethan took a chance. "Do you work here full-time?" he asked, aiming for a casual tone. She paused, then nodded. "Yeah, been here a little over 3 years. It's a good place. Not fancy, but steady. I like the people." He smiled. "That's hard to find these days." Anna shrugged slightly, brushing her hands on her apron. "Yeah, I guess I got lucky." Ethan tilted his head. "Where were you before this, if you don't mind me asking?" She hesitated, just for a second, but then replied, "All over, really. Some cleaning jobs, small diners. Nothing that stuck. I've moved around a lot." Something in the way she said that made his chest tighten. It wasn't just a generic answer. It was guarded, rehearsed, like someone who had learned to keep her past tucked away neatly in a drawer she didn't open for strangers. "That can be hard," he said quietly, never really settling anywhere. Anna glanced at him, and for a moment, he saw a flicker in her expression. "You get used to it," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Then, just like that, she turned and walked back toward the kitchen, leaving Ethan alone with a plate of steaming food and more questions than ever. He didn't touch the meal. He just sat there, heart pounding, mind spinning. This woman wasn't just someone who looked like Claire. She was someone running from a past she might not even remember. And Ethan was no longer just curious. He was invested. Ethan stayed for a while after he paid the bill, pretending to sip the now warm iced tea while watching Anna from a distance. She moved with an ease that came from habit, but underneath that grace, he thought he could see something else. Tension, maybe, like she was used to being watched, used to staying on alert. Before leaving, he thanked her again. "The stroganoff was perfect," he said. "You were right." She smiled, more genuine this time. "Glad you liked it." As he stepped out into the warm afternoon, the little bell above the door jingled behind him, and the noise of the street replaced the soft hum of the restaurant. Ethan didn't go home right away. Instead, he sat in his car for a few minutes, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes glued to the restaurant's facade. He thought about everything Marcus had told him. A missing childhood, no family, no answers. It was like Anna had been dropped into the world at age 5 with no history. He couldn't stop the image from forming in his mind. Claire and Anna as babies, side by side, holding hands. Had they really been sisters? Had someone taken Anna and erased her identity? And if so, why? He reached for his phone and sent a quick text to Marcus. "She's definitely her. I need you to dig deeper. Anything about where she came from, who she might have been before 5. Marcus replied within seconds. "On it. Might take a day or 2. Ethan locked his phone and leaned his head back against the seat, eyes closed. He hadn't felt this kind of anticipation since Claire was alive, like something big was about to change. He didn't know what he'd uncover next, but whatever it was, it already felt like his life, and Emily's, would never be the same again. The next morning started like any other, but Ethan's thoughts were far from ordinary. He moved through the routine, making breakfast, packing Emily's lunch, dropping her off at school, all while replaying every second of the previous day. Once he was alone in the car again, the silence pressed down on him. He didn't want to go to the office. He couldn't sit in meetings pretending his mind wasn't somewhere else entirely. So instead, he drove aimlessly for a while, circling the same block 3 times before pulling over near a small park. That was where his phone buzzed with a new message from Marcus. "Got something. Meet me at your place in an hour." Ethan's pulse jumped. He didn't reply, just started driving home, the urgency in his chest growing by the second. When Marcus arrived, he was carrying a folder thick with papers and a serious look on his face. They sat in the kitchen, the morning light spilling across the table. "So," Marcus began, flipping the folder open. "This wasn't easy, but I found something. When Anna showed up at the orphanage, she didn't have any ID or documents. But one of the women working there, an older caretaker, kept a private journal. I tracked her down." Ethan leaned in, eyes wide. "And?" "She remembers Anna. Said she always felt like the girl came from somewhere better. Said she was too clean, too well-mannered to have been homeless or abandoned on the streets. She always thought something was off. And get this, around the same time, a prominent family in the city reported their twin daughters missing. Ethan's heart stopped. Twins? Marcus nodded. One of the girls was found a few days later, deceased. The other? Never recovered. Ethan's entire body went cold. You think Anna is the missing twin? I don't just think. It, Marcus said, sliding a grainy, time-worn photograph across the table. I'm almost certain. Ethan stared at the photograph Marcus slid across the table. The picture was old and faded, clearly from a time before smartphones and digital clarity, but the image was unmistakable. Two identical little girls, maybe 3 years old, standing in front of what looked like a large white house, arms around each other, both smiling with the kind of joy only children know. On the back, in faint cursive handwriting, it read, Claire and Anna, age 3. Ethan's hands trembled as he held the photo. It was her. It was both of them. Claire, the woman he had loved and lost, and Anna, the woman now working in a quiet diner, completely unaware of the life that had been stolen from her. Where did this come from? Ethan asked, voice low. Marcus pointed to the folder. The caretaker I spoke to had kept a few things. She said she always suspected something wasn't right with Anna's arrival. No documentation, no one ever came looking for her. But she kept her mouth shut, afraid, I think, of stirring trouble back then. When the photo surfaced, she decided to hang on to it. She said she found it tucked inside a donated box of clothes that came in just after Anna was dropped off. She never connected the dots until now. Ethan leaned back in his chair, mind spinning. This wasn't speculation anymore. It was real. Anna wasn't just a stranger. She was family, and she didn't even know it. He looked up at Marcus. Do we know what happened? Why they were separated? Marcus hesitated, flipping through the next few pages. That's still unclear. The report on the twin girls' abduction was heavily redacted, but I did find mention of a suspect who was never charged. Someone connected to the foster care system. Someone who had ties to illegal adoption rings. Are you saying Anna was trafficked? Ethan asked, his voice tight, nearly breaking under the weight of it. Marcus nodded slowly, his expression grim. It's a real possibility. Everything about her background screams cover-up. No paper trail before 5 years old, suddenly placed in a system with no legal transfer of custody, and then shuffled through temporary jobs with no stability. Whoever took her wanted her to disappear, not just physically, but legally. Ethan pushed his chair back and stood up, needing to move, to breathe. He paced the kitchen in silence, his mind racing through 1,000 possibilities. This was no longer just a mystery. It was a crime, and Anna had been living inside its shadow her entire life. Does she have any idea? He finally asked, turning back to Marcus. None. From what I can tell, she truly doesn't remember anything from before the orphanage. I think whatever trauma she went through erased a lot, or maybe someone made sure she never found out. Ethan felt a storm brewing inside him. Rage, grief, protection, all mixing into something he couldn't yet name. What do I do now? He asked almost to himself. Marcus leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. You tell her, eventually, but carefully. She deserves to know the truth, and you're the only one who can give it to her. Ethan nodded, but his hands were still shaking. How could he tell Anna that her whole life was built on a lie? That her family, her real family, had never stopped looking? That she had a sister who had loved her and died without ever knowing what happened to her twin? The weight of it all was unbearable. But one thing was clear now. He couldn't walk away. Anna wasn't just someone who looked like Claire. She was Claire's sister, and she had to know who she truly was. Ethan didn't go to the restaurant that day. He needed time to process, to figure out what to say, how to say it, when to say it. The truth weighed heavy on his chest, and every part of him wanted to run straight to Anna and blurt it all out. But he couldn't. He knew how delicate this was. He had to think about her, about what it would feel like to learn that everything she knew about her life, her childhood, her name, her very identity, wasn't real. He spent the rest of the afternoon at home, sitting in the living room with a notepad in his lap, jotting down words, then crossing them out. How do you tell someone they've been living a life that was stolen from them? That they had a sister who was murdered? That they came from love, but had been raised in silence? The thought of hurting her made him sick, but keeping it from her felt even worse. Later that evening, while Emily colored in her sketchbook and Max sat upright beside her like a silent bodyguard, Ethan watched her from across the room and imagined Anna sitting beside them. It didn't feel strange. It felt natural, like she already belonged there, like she had always belonged. And that scared him even more, because now, his desire to tell Anna the truth wasn't just about giving her answers. It was about protecting something he hadn't expected. To feel again, the possibility of a future, a real one with her in it. But how could he ask her to step into his life if he was about to destroy the only one she'd ever known? That night, he didn't sleep again. He kept going over the same thought. If it were Claire, she would have wanted Anna to know everything. The following day, Ethan knew he couldn't wait any longer. Whether he was ready or not, Anna deserved the truth. And she deserved it from someone who cared about her, not from a file, folder, or a police report. He dropped Emily off at school, told the office he'd be unreachable for the day, and drove straight to the restaurant. He didn't even remember the drive, only the knot in his stomach tightening with every block. When he arrived, the lunch rush was still an hour away, and the dining room was quiet. Anna was arranging silverware at a table near the back, her hair tied up messily, her apron already stained. When she saw Ethan, she straightened, surprised, but not unhappy. "Hey," she said with a smile. "Back again?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I was hoping we could talk. Outside, maybe?" She glanced toward the counter, where her manager was flipping through receipts. A flicker of worry crossed her face, but she nodded. "Just a minute." A few moments later, she joined him on the sidewalk, arms crossed loosely, her expression curious. "Everything okay?" Ethan hesitated. For the first time since this all began, the words didn't come easily. "I found out something." He began, his voice low. "Something about you, about your past." Anna stiffened slightly, her brows knitting. "What do you mean?" Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the photo Marcus had given him, the one of the two little girls. He handed it to her slowly. "Do you recognize either of them?" She took the photo, her hands trembling slightly, and studied it. Her eyes moved over the image, pausing on the handwriting on the back. Then something in her face shifted. Confusion, shock, and something deeper. Something that looked like pain rising from a place she didn't know existed. "Why do they look like me?" she whispered. Ethan took a careful step closer, his voice soft. "Because one of them is you." Anna didn't respond at first. She just kept staring at the photograph, her fingers clutching the edges as if it might vanish if she blinked. Her breath grew shallow, and he could see the storm forming behind her eyes. This isn't possible," she muttered. "I've never seen this picture. I don't know these girls." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know it's a lot, but I promise you, it's real. Their names were Claire and Anna. You're Anna." She looked up at him sharply, eyes wide. "Claire?" Her voice cracked slightly. "That was your wife, wasn't it?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, she passed away 3 years ago. But before that, she always said she was an only child. Her family never talked about the past much. After she died, I found out there were gaps, things that didn't add up. And then, I saw you." Anna looked away, the photo still in her hand, her lips trembling. "You're saying I had a sister? And no one told me? You were taken from your family when you were very young," he said gently. "There are people who think you were trafficked, illegally adopted and moved through the system with no trace of your origin. I don't know all the details yet, but I've seen enough to know it's true." Her knees gave slightly, and Ethan instinctively reached out, steadying her. With a hand on her arm, she didn't pull away. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. "I don't remember anything. I don't remember a sister. I don't remember being taken. I just remember waking up in that shelter, alone." Her voice broke. "I thought that was where my life began." Ethan's eyes stung, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The truth was there between them, sharp and heavy, impossible to ignore. Anna sat down on the bench just outside the restaurant, holding the photograph like it might explain everything if she stared at it long enough. Ethan sat beside her, but gave her space, knowing she needed a moment to breathe. She didn't cry, she didn't yell, but her silence was louder than either. He could see it, her entire identity unraveling right there in the soft morning light. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "All this time, I thought I was just one of those kids who got lost in the system. I didn't question it. I didn't want to. She looked down at her hands. There's a kind of safety in not knowing. When you don't have a past, you don't have to feel responsible for it. You just exist. Ethan nodded. I understand. But now that you do know, she interrupted him gently. I don't know how to feel. There's a hole inside me I've never been able to explain. Like I was missing something, but I didn't know what. And now, her voice trailed off as she looked back at the photo. She looks like me. She is me. Ethan's voice was steady. She loved deeply. She was kind, smart, stubborn as hell. And if she had known you were alive, if she'd had even a hint, you'd have never been apart. Anna wiped at her eye quickly, a gesture she didn't even seem aware of. So, she's really gone? Yes, Ethan said softly. But you're not. And now, neither is she. Not really. Anna turned to look at him, her eyes glossy but focused. What do I do with this? What am I supposed to do now? Ethan gave the only answer he had. You take your time. You ask questions. You grieve. And when you're ready, you come home. To the family that never stopped waiting for you. They sat there in silence for a long time, the hum of traffic and distant conversations filling the space where neither of them knew what else to say. Anna held the photo gently on her lap, her eyes tracing the outlines of two small girls who had once shared a world she couldn't remember. It was strange how familiar the image felt to her now, like a dream she'd had years ago but only just now remembered. I always wondered why I never felt like I belonged anywhere, she said eventually, her voice low. Every job I've ever had, every place I've lived, it always felt temporary, like I was just passing through. Ethan didn't interrupt. He knew that what she was saying wasn't for him. She was speaking her truth out loud for the first time, shaping it into something she could finally understand. But this, she continued, this makes sense. It hurts, but it makes sense. She turned toward him then, her expression unreadable. Why did you come back? Why not just leave it alone? Ethan took a breath. Because I saw my wife in your face, and because my daughter pointed you out before I even noticed. She said you looked like her mom, and when I looked I saw Claire. So vividly it scared me. I couldn't walk away from that. I owed it to Claire. I owed it to Emily. And now I know. I owed it to you. Anna looked down again, processing. You think I'm her sister, but I don't feel like anyone's sister. I don't feel like anyone at all right now. Her honesty cut deep. Ethan didn't try to fix it. He simply said, then let's start with one step, one truth. You're not alone anymore. And for the first time, she didn't look away. That afternoon, Ethan didn't return to work. Instead, he brought Anna to a quiet cafe a few blocks away, where the noise was soft and the windows looked out onto a peaceful tree-lined street. They sat by the window, two people who just days before had been strangers, now bound by a shared history neither had asked for. Over coffee and silence, Anna asked questions about Claire, about their childhood, about what Ethan remembered. He told her stories. He spoke of Claire's favorite music, the way she danced barefoot in the kitchen, how she used to hum when she concentrated. He described the way she laughed with her whole body, the way she cared for people fiercely, how stubborn she was when she believed in something. Anna didn't cry, but her eyes stayed wet the entire time. She was quiet, taking in every word like she was filling in a missing part of herself. She sounds like someone I would have loved, she said softly. Ethan smiled. She would have loved you too. Then Anna reached into her purse, pulled out a small beat-up notebook and opened it. Inside were pages of sketches, faces, flowers, small moments frozen in ink. She showed him one, a drawing of two little girls holding hands in front of a house. I drew this 3 years ago, she said. I never understood why. Ethan stared at the image, stunned. You remembered her, he whispered, even if you didn't know it. Anna nodded, her voice barely audible. I think I've always known something was missing. I just didn't know her name. Outside, the sky had begun to dim and the cafe lights flickered on. Anna closed the notebook slowly. I think I want to meet your daughter, she said. Not yet, but soon. And Ethan understood exactly what that meant. The following week passed like a quiet storm. Ethan didn't push Anna for anything. He sent the occasional message, brief and thoughtful, sometimes a memory of Claire, sometimes just a simple thinking of you. Anna responded when she could. Her replies were careful, sometimes hesitant, but always honest. He could feel her sorting through everything, slowly, painfully, deliberately. She wasn't the kind of person who rushed into anything, and now, knowing what had been taken from her, Ethan understood. That pace wasn't hesitation, it was survival. Meanwhile, Ethan talked to Emily gently, piece by piece, laying the groundwork. He told her about Claire's childhood, about the sister who had been lost when they were very young. Emily listened with wide eyes, always clutching Max, her ever-present teddy bear. "Is she like Mommy?" she asked once. Ethan smiled. "In some ways, yes. In other ways, she's her own person. But she's part of our story now." Emily nodded solemnly, accepting it in the way only children can, without judgment, only curiosity. The day Anna finally said she was ready to meet Emily, Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared at the message for a long time, feeling everything shift inside him. This wasn't just about answers anymore. It was about family. It was about repair. He replied simply, "We'd love that." That Saturday, he cleaned the house more thoroughly than he had in months. Not because he wanted it to look perfect, but because he needed something to focus on. Something to help him manage the nervous hope that had taken root. When the doorbell rang, Ethan stood frozen for a second. Emily ran past him to answer it, her little feet thudding against the floor. And when the door opened, and Anna stood there with her hands folded nervously in front of her, Ethan saw something unexpected in Emily's eyes. Recognition. Anna stood on the threshold like someone afraid to cross into a memory. She wore a soft blue sweater and simple jeans, nothing remarkable, but Ethan couldn't stop thinking how much she looked like Claire standing there, different but unmistakably part of her. Emily looked up at her, wide-eyed, and held Max a little tighter. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Anna knelt down slowly, lowering herself to eye level. "Hi," she said gently. "I'm Anna." Emily tilted her head, thoughtful. "You look like Mommy." Ethan's breath caught, but Anna didn't flinch. She gave a soft smile. "I've heard that." Emily nodded, serious. "Do you want to come in?" Anna looked up at Ethan for the first time, her eyes uncertain. He gave the smallest nod. "Please." She stepped inside slowly, as though afraid something might shatter. The air in the house felt charged with something sacred. Grief, hope, healing, all woven together. Anna looked around quietly. The family photos on the wall, the couch with the cozy throw blanket, the dining table already set for lunch. She took it in like someone arriving in a place they had dreamed of, but never believed was real. Emily led her to the living room and sat beside her on the couch without hesitation. Max tucked between them like a tiny ambassador. Anna's hand rested gently on the bear's paw, and for a long time, the two sat like that. No pressure, no need to explain, just being. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching, hardly believing what he was seeing. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was healing, in the quietest, most honest way possible. And in that moment, he realized something. Simple and overwhelming. They weren't just rebuilding the past, they were creating something entirely new. The afternoon unfolded slowly, and Ethan made no effort to guide it. He let it breathe, let Anna and Emily find their own rhythm. They played a board game on the living room floor, one Ethan had taken from the closet just in case. Emily explained the rules with the confident authority of a 5-year-old, and Anna listened with quiet attention, her laughter soft and surprised when Emily beat her in the first round. Ethan watched them from the kitchen, preparing lunch but only half focused on the task. Every so often, he would glance into the room and see something so gentle it made his chest ache. Anna tucking a piece of hair behind Emily's ear, or Emily showing her a drawing she'd made. Nothing extraordinary, but deeply human. Healing didn't come in big, cinematic moments. It came in those, quiet, slow, tentative. By the time they sat down to eat, something had shifted. The tension in Anna's shoulders had softened, and Emily seemed more comfortable too, chattering about school, her favorite cartoons, and how Max sometimes gets scared of the dark and needs her to sing to him. Anna listened with a smile, nodding along, asking questions, not because she felt obligated, but because she wanted to understand. Ethan felt it happening in real time, the formation of something real, not just between Emily and Anna, but between all three of them, something unspoken, forming thread by thread, like a net strong enough to hold them all. After lunch, Emily excused herself to her room to draw, and Anna helped clear the dishes. It was simple, Easy, as if she'd always been there. Ethan caught her eye at one point, and neither of them said anything. But in that glance they both knew the ground had shifted beneath them, and nothing would be the same again. Later that evening, as the sky outside turned dusky pink, Anna stood near the front door, her jacket in hand, unsure of how to say goodbye. Emily had hugged her twice already, once on the couch and again by the doorway, as if trying to make sure this visit wouldn't be the last. Ethan walked her to the porch, and for a moment they stood in silence, the sounds of the neighborhood settling around them, distant voices, a dog barking, leaves rustling gently in the breeze. "Thank you for today," Anna said finally, her voice quieter than usual. "I didn't expect it to feel like this." Ethan nodded. "Like what?" She looked down, then back up at him, and there was something clear in her eyes now. "Like home, and I don't even know what that's supposed to mean, but that's how it felt." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. "It meant everything to us that you came." Anna nodded, eyes lingering on the doorway, where Emily had waved her last goodbye. "I think I needed it more than I realized." She turned to go, but paused halfway down the steps. "I'm not ready to know everything yet. About Claire. About all of it. But I want to keep walking toward it. Slowly, if that's okay." Ethan stepped down beside her. "That's more than okay. You set the pace. We're not going anywhere." Anna gave a small smile. Not a performative one, but something genuine. Something earned. Then she turned and walked toward her car, and Ethan watched until she drove out of sight. When he stepped back into the house, Emily looked up from her drawing. "Is she coming back?" she asked. Ethan smiled, his voice steady. "Yes, sweetheart, I think she is." The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm, like a new chapter slowly unfolding without fanfare. Anna didn't visit every day, but when she did, it never felt awkward or forced. Sometimes she brought muffins or fresh bread from the corner bakery. Sometimes she just came by to sit on the porch, talk to Ethan, or color with Emily on the living room rug. And as each visit passed, something inside her seemed to thaw. She asked more questions about Claire's childhood, about their parents, about the woman she never got to know, but somehow felt tied to in a way deeper than words. Ethan showed her home videos, the ones he'd hidden away for years because watching them had felt like reopening a wound. But with Anna beside him, the pain shifted. It still hurt, but now it was laced with meaning, with connection. He watched Anna watching Claire on the screen, her face a mixture of wonder and sadness. "We even moved the same way," she whispered once, more to herself than to him. She didn't always cry. Sometimes she laughed, and those laughs were the most healing sound Ethan had heard in years. Emily began calling her Aunt Anna naturally, like it had always been part of her vocabulary. There was no formal moment, no explanation needed, just the instinctive way children understand things deeper than most adults ever do. Ethan began to feel something he hadn't dared to hope for since Claire's death. Peace. Not the absence of sadness, but the presence of something new, growing from it. It was in the way Anna fit into their lives without pushing, without demanding space. She had lived her life in the shadows of questions. Now, she was finally starting to live in the light of answers. One Saturday morning, months after that first life-changing encounter at the restaurant, Ethan woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of soft laughter from the kitchen. He walked in to find Emily at the table, face smudged with flour, while Anna flipped pancakes at the stove, her hair tied up, her sleeves rolled. It was such a simple scene, yet it stopped him in his tracks. For a long time, he had believed his life had ended with Claire's. He had accepted the idea that some stories didn't get second chapters, that some losses were too big to recover from. But standing there, he realized something that brought tears to his eyes, not of grief, but of quiet gratitude. His story hadn't ended. It had shifted. It had grown, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as an evolution of it. Anna turned and smiled when she saw him, and Emily waved a sticky hand in the air, saying, "Daddy, Aunt Anna makes the best pancakes ever." And Ethan laughed, freely, deeply, like he hadn't in years. Later that day, they visited the cemetery together. Anna brought flowers, white lilies. She stood in front of Claire's grave for a long time, saying nothing out loud, but her eyes said everything, that she was sorry, that she missed her, that she wished they'd had more time. Ethan watched her, standing just behind, with Emily holding his hand. And in that quiet, sacred moment, something settled inside all of them. Not closure, because some things never truly close, but understanding, connection, continuity. When they walked back to the car, the wind picked up gently, and Anna turned her face into it. "I don't remember her," she said softly, "but somehow I miss her every day." Ethan nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "That's how I know your family.